Hey, thanks for joining me. I'm so glad that you decided to stop by and check out this video because I am being vindicated for a lifelong amount of time of being teased for being anal retentive. Oh my gosh. Look at bottom line is my organizational skills and my ability to be anal retentive and basically it's actually paid off for me in the caregiving world. Go figure. But it has. It really has. You know, I was starting to do some videos talking about tips, and here's a really good tip for you. If it gets to the point that you're taking care, in my case, I was taking care of both my parents, right? And sometimes at the same time, but mostly it's like I needed to focus on one parent, leave the other one to be independent, and then I would take care of them. So I went back and forth. But my dad got really, really sick. And this is not about dementia, but it's still about caregiving. My dad got really, really sick. He was always a kidney patient because he had one kidney. He lost one to World War II in a concentration camp when under dysentery situation. Um, it shriveled up like a little raisin. So he had that as an issue. He was also a diabetic. And in the process of his body breaking down, he started going to an oncologist. He didn't necessarily have cancer, but he had a blood disorder that was an odd and a rare blood disorder. Uh, myeloid something. I can't even remember what it was. I'm sure if I looked at the notes, I could tell you what it is. But basically, it was an odd form of leukemia. And they went to an oncologist. They did a bone marrow test in office, and his health just started declining after that. And that happened in August of 2019. And it was a lot of blood transfusions because what ended up happening is his body was not producing platelets anymore, which then made him anemic. And they found out that his blood level, because there's a certain number that you should have for your hemoglobin count, which is your blood count, right? And to see if you how many platelets you have, he was low. And so there was a standing order for my dad to have um, transfusions if it got to be a certain number. I think on an average, he would have been okay if it was like in uh, 12 or 13, but literally he was down in the below 10. There was one time when he was like at a number 7 rating and he looked pasty. I mean, pasty. And then we were happened to be in San Diego at his doctor's office, and I took him to the hospital. Or he was there for a transfusion, and I looked at him. I go, "Are you okay?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm okay." But I noticed he wasn't reacting quickly. His reactions were pretty slow. He looked like putty. And I put him in his rolling walker, that you could sit on. And I rolled him through the hospital as fast as I could to get to the emergency room. And I said he needs a transfusion ASAP. He needs something because he's bottoming out. Um. Anyway, so Dad had a bunch of issues, is what I'm trying to get at. My anal retentiveness has paid off, and because I got the largest binders that you could find. I mean, they were like the binding itself was like this big. It was big. And in it, I had sections. I made sections. They held his appointments, his past appointments, his future appointments, test results, lab order results, If he went to hospitals, because he stayed around my area in Riverside County, he lived in San Diego County, but depending what hospital he had to visit or whatever needed to be done, I kept every hospital visit organized with their own little tabs. If he stayed in a hospital for an extensive amount of time, I would always ask for the discharge papers and a full report, which means all the tests and all the test results they did while he was at that stay. Um, his prescriptions. Every time you go to a hospital, they change your prescriptions. They either add or they drop, and they tell you exactly what needs to be done. And I learned this. My God, we went to the hospital so many times. I actually learned this. They always want you to see the PCP within that week of your discharge. And if the hospitalist and the doctors on staff at the hospital say, these are your meds now. You start with this tonight. You take this at the next day, and blah blah blah. Their prescription orders on the discharge sheet is what your PCP will follow. The PCP follows the hospitalist's instructions. I thought it was the other way around because he's a primary care physician, right? But no, he said, anytime your dad goes into the hospital, and this goes for anybody, anytime you go into the hospital and they change up the medicine, we at the doctor's office want to have a copy of that because now we will follow the hospital's orders. The PCP will always start out with everything, right? Because you're seeing them on a regular basis. So you'll start out with their instructions. But if for any reason you end up at the hospital, they supersede that order from the PCP. And then the hospitalist, uh, when they give you your new instructions, you give that to the PCP to make sure that everybody's on the same page and that you're following those orders. I'm not kidding you. My dad went to the hospital so many times. I finally got it right. So I had to keep everything in this binder. Um, so the prescriptions, uh, I made a list of doctors' names, nurses' names, who I was in contact, where I was in contact with them, any specialists, who the specialists were. They got their own little section, and any documentation they would have. Now, the reason why I did this is because a lot of times, especially what I learned with my dad, because he lived in San Diego County, but he would frequent my area, which is Riverside County in California. He would have a medical situation, and sometimes we couldn't even drive to San Diego. We would have to drive to a local hospital or doctor. And sometimes their computer systems didn't speak to each other. Maybe they were out of a different organization, hospital, uh, care facility. So a lot of times the reports that they would draw up were only good within the system, local system. The area network that they dealt with was only good for the area that you were in. And they sometimes never went to San Diego County. And so San Diego County wouldn't know what Riverside County would be doing. And so the binder worked as a fill-in, because if I was in San Diego County, I'd say, hey, my dad was during this time and that time, he was at the hospital for XYZ. He used to have TIAs, which are mini strokes. And if something should occur, if there was a medical situation, I would share the documentation with the doctors in San Diego, and they would constantly be saying, oh, this is good to know. I didn't know this, and so they put it in their file. And even if I was in Riverside County, they would take the San Diego County files that were applicable to whatever dad was going through. So there was always fluidity. There was always a way of making sure everybody was on the same page. Ironically, I was the one that was the link. It got so bad And I know not everybody's like this, but there had to be some form of consistency. There needed to be some form of synchronicity within the systems with regard to my dad. And I made sure that it seemed seamless, but it got so bad that I had two of those large binders, two of them, and they were freaking heavy, you know? And it took me to be my anal retentive that I've gotten teased all my life about being organized and having to be meticulous in a certain way. It actually paid off. But it got so heavy, I was like, oh my God, Deborah, I need to go down to like Staples or whatever and get one of those milk crates, but they were collapsible and then they had little wheels. So it'd be a rolling milk crate, with the retractable uh, handle. And I put everything in there. And sure enough, if we went to the doctor's office, if I went to a hospital visit with dad, if he had a blood transfusion or whatever, um, I would be walking right behind him with my little rolling milk crate to the point that if we were in the hospital, people would ask me, um, the gentleman that was just checked in for whatever, and I go, yeah. Um, are you part of the medical staff? And I started laughing. I go, no, I'm his daughter. They go, oh, we saw the rolling crate and all the binders and all that stuff. I said, no, that's me trying to keep him organized for all his stuff. And it was just so funny because I realized, and you might have this too, if you walk in sheepishly, people won't notice you. If you walk in with, oh, I don't know if I should be here. No, you walk in. Remember, you are the advocate for your loved one, but you walk in with your back straight, your head up high, and you don't have to be a bully. You don't have to be a douchebag about it. But you can walk in with assertive confidence and you can walk in with authority. People respect that as long as you're not acting like a jerk. But you can walk in, and I always walk straight up to the nurse's desk. They have their little desk where they all do their stuff. I went and I said, I'm here for patient so and so. If he was staying there, what room is he in? And who's his nurse at this point? Because they change every 12 hours, right? They have a shift change and all that. I made sure I had everybody's name, the day nurse, the night nurse. They have babysitters now that stay in the room and make sure that, somebody's always there with the patients and whatever circumstances might be there. But I made sure I had names. And if there was a shift change, I would make sure to find out how long they were going to be my dad's nurse, night nurse, day nurse, who the assistant is, who the CNA is, which is certified nursing assistant. And I would make sure that everybody knew who I was. And if there was a little white chart, like a board in the room, I would write my name and my phone number because they better know if something was going on, they best call me. There's nothing wrong with being assertive. There's nothing wrong with that. But people need to know who you are and that you're there for your loved one. There's nothing wrong. You don't have to be a jerk about it. You can be friends with everybody, but let them know, hey, I exist and I'm here for so-and-so. I did it with appointments. I did it with hospitals. And like I said, I made sure that it was organized. I had different colored tabs to represent certain sections that were dedicated only to the primary care physician, the oncologist specialist, prescriptions, hospital charts, test results, authorization documents. If I made a photocopy of something or I'd ask for a copy, I'd do a 3-hole punch, stick it in there. Appointments, past appointments, and future appointments. Why would I do that? so that I can at least let whoever I'm meeting with say, yes, let me flip back. Dad had an appointment on this day. And when the nurse would do his vital signs, like his blood pressure, his weight, his temperature and all that stuff, I would make sure I would write it down on those appointment sheets so that when I could revert back to, yeah, he had this appointment on that day, then I could at least tell them on this day his BP was. Same thing. Dad was every day he was very diligent of taking his blood sugar. So I would know what the numbers were at that time. And I make sure that I have that information because that's vital as well. And every day, Dad was really good about this. He took his glucose testing with the pricking of the finger, and then he did the blood pressure, and he put it on those little Hallmark calendar card booklets. He would write that down in the little square, BP this, and his glucose numbers and all that stuff. He would write that down, and I'd take that little book with me. And the doctor could ask me any question. I'd look it back and I go, oh, well, on an average for this week, he was averaging about 107, 198 for his blood sugar. Like, okay, that's good. That's good. And his BP was pretty regular. There wasn't any problems. Those things are so key. All it does is take a little bit of effort. And, like I said, there's nothing like being the liaison between different factors. The specialist isn't going to know the same thing as a PCP. It's better to never assume that they all know the same thing and be pleasantly surprised if they do. But by you keeping organized and you having this information available, you're able to present it to them on behalf of your loved one. And you're able to fill in the gaps of things that people don't know. I can't tell you how good that was. And make yourself available to be present within those appointments. I said it in another video. Make yourself be part of those appointments. Take notes. Be that advocate for your loved one. They need it so badly. Because let's think about it this way. Your loved one may not say it, may not even show it, but it's got to be scary when you don't know what's wrong with you, or you do know what's wrong with you and you don't know where you're headed. It's comforting to know that somebody loves you enough that you want to be there with them to help them and give them a little bit of peace of mind and help them during an unfamiliar territory. It means everything. I know I'd want somebody with me, not necessarily to hold my hand, but just to know that someone cares enough that they want to be with me. Take that to the bank. It makes everything so much better for everybody. Really, trust me, I've been through this. And with that, I'm going to tell you, thank you, first of all, for joining me. Remember to be blessed. And remember to always take good care of yourself too. I'll see you in the next video. Hey, thanks for watching. And please remember to hit the subscribe button. We are trying to grow our channel and reach 1,000 subscribers. Now, for every new subscriber, these two nutheads right here, they're going to get a treat. So we will all be happy. Thanks for watching.